The massive Zephrian fleet moved through space like giant metal sharks hunting their prey. Their target was a small blue planet that spun around a yellow sun. Admiral Hugh stood on the bridge of his flagship called Dominion's Edge, his green. Scaled hands tapped against the control panel as he read the reports from his scouts. "Sir, this world looks very easy to conquer," said his tactical officer, a young Zephrian named Crix. "The humans have basic weapons and no spaceships to defend themselves. They fight each other more than they work together. We should take over in just a few days." Chgook smiled, showing his sharp teeth. The Zephrian Empire had conquered 17 different worlds in the last 10 years. Each planet fell quickly when their powerful ships arrived. Earth would be just another easy victory to add to their list. "Good," Hugh said, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen. "Soon we will add another slave world to our empire. These humans will learn to serve us just like all the others." The blue and green planet looked peaceful and beautiful from space. White clouds swirled over the oceans and continents. It seemed like a quiet world with no real dangers. The Zephrians had studied Earth for months. They knew humans fought wars with primitive weapons. They had seen the divided countries that could not unite against a common enemy. Everything pointed to an easy conquest. As the massive fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, communications officer Vex began picking up radio signals from the planet's surface. He listened carefully to the human voices, his translation device working to understand their languages. Admiral Vex called out, his voice confused. "I am hearing strange reports from the surface. The humans are talking about creatures coming up from the deep ocean. They say ancient things are waking up under the mountains. Some are screaming about monsters in the darkness." Huck laughed and waved his hand dismissively. "Just primitive fears and silly stories. These backward people probably think our ships are their mythical gods or demons. Deploy the landing craft to their biggest cities. We will have their surrender before the sun sets on this world." The first wave of Zephrian dropships launched from the main fleet. These smaller craft carried soldiers and weapons to establish control points in major human population centers. Each dropship could hold 50 warriors armed with plasma rifles and energy shields. The plan was simple: land in the cities, destroy any resistance, and force the human leaders to surrender. But something went wrong almost immediately. 3 dropships, flying over the Pacific Ocean, simply vanished. One moment they were reporting normal descent, the next moment there was only silence. The ships did not crash, they did not explode. They just disappeared as if something had swallowed them whole. "Admiral," the communications officer reported with worry in his voice. "We have lost contact with dropships 7, 12, and 15. Their signals just stopped." Hugh frowned. "Equipment failures were rare but possible. Send rescue ships too." Their last known positions. Before the rescue ships could launch, 2 more dropships disappeared over the Himalayan mountains. Their final transmissions carried sounds that made even the experienced alien warriors shiver with fear. Deep, rumbling roars that seemed to come from something impossibly large. Sounds that hurt to hear, as if they came from creatures that should not exist. "What was that noise?" whispered a young soldier on the bridge. Nobody answered because nobody knew. The remaining dropships continued their descent. But now, every crew member watched their instruments carefully. The pilots reported strange readings on their sensors. Massive shapes moving deep under the ocean, heat signatures in mountain caves that were far too large to be any known Earth animal, in the command center beneath the city of Seoul. Dr. Minji. Kim stared at her computer screens in horror. She was a scientist who studied earthquakes and ground movements. Her instruments showed impossible readings from all over the planet. "General Park," she called to the military commander. "Something is moving beneath the ocean floor. The seismic activity is not natural. Whatever it is huge." General Daeho Park looked at the data with growing alarm. "How big are we talking about?" "Bigger than anything that should be alive," Minji replied. "And there are more of them. The alien invasion seems to have triggered something. Things that have been sleeping deep underground are starting to wake up." Around the world, similar reports came in. Ancient burial sites in Europe began to crack open. The Sahara Desert showed massive underground movements. Deep ocean monitoring stations detected enormous creatures rising from trenches that scientists thought were empty. Admiral Huck received these reports with growing unease. His easy conquest was becoming something entirely different. The primitive humans were not cowering in fear of his mighty fleet. Instead, they seemed to be running from something else entirely, something that lived on their own world. "Sir," Vex reported, his voice shaking slightly, "the human transmissions are changing. They are not talking about surrendering to us anymore. They are begging us for protection from something they call the Ancient Ones. Some are saying the old stories were true, that things have been sleeping under the earth and sea for thousands of years." Hugh stared at the blue planet below. What had seemed like a simple conquest was becoming a nightmare. His invasion fleet, designed to conquer primitive worlds, suddenly felt very small in the darkness of space. Something was waking up on Earth. It was not happy about being disturbed. The Zephrian soldiers landed in the biggest cities around, Earth expecting to see humans running away in fear. Admiral Huck watched from his ship as his troops set up control points in New York, London, Tokyo, and Seoul. Everything seemed to be going according to plan at first, but then something strange happened that made Huck's blood run cold. In New York City, the humans were not running away from his soldiers. Instead, they were running toward them, screaming for help and protection from something else entirely. Lieutenant G1 had just finished setting up a plasma cannon on a rooftop in Manhattan when he heard the screaming start. First, he thought the humans were finally afraid of the Zephrian weapons. But when he looked down at the street, he saw people running toward his position, not away from it. "Help us," a human woman shouted in broken English as she pointed toward the Hudson River. "Something is coming out of the water." Giwan looked toward the river and felt his heart stop. The water was bubbling and churning as if it was boiling. Then something began to rise from the depths that made no sense to his eyes or mind. It was a creature made of writhing tentacles and twisted flesh that it seemed to bend and fold in ways that hurt to look at. Parts of its body appeared to exist in one place, then suddenly be somewhere else without moving. Its skin was black and green and seemed to shift like oil on water. The thing was massive, easily as tall as a building, and it made sounds that were not quite roars and not quite screams. "What in the void is that thing?" Guan spoke into his communicator as the creature's horrible cry shattered every window. Within miles. The sound made his ears bleed and filled his mind with images of darkness and despair. G1 raised his plasma rifle and fired at the creature. The blue energy beam that could melt through the hull of a starship hit the monster directly. In what might have been its face, the blast barely left a mark on its impossible hide. The creature turned its attention toward G1 and began moving through the city streets like a living nightmare. Buildings crumbled as it passed through them rather than around them. Cars and buses were crushed like toys under its bulk. Similar reports began flooding in from Zephrian forces all over the planet. In London, ancient burial mounds that had stood for thousands of years suddenly cracked open like eggs. Things that had been sleeping beneath the earth for longer than human memory began crawling out into the sunlight. These creatures looked like they were made of bones and shadows and moved in ways that defied the laws of physics. In the Sahara Desert, the sand itself began to split apart in massive cracks that ran for miles. From these cracks emerged creatures so alien and terrifying that looking directly at them caused madness. Several Zephrian soldiers reported that their eyes began bleeding just from seeing these things. Captain Yun-Ho was leading the occupation. Force and soul, when the ground beneath the city began to shake. Ancient trees in the nearby forests, some older than human civilization, suddenly began to move. What everyone had thought were normal trees were actually massive creatures that had been sleeping while camouflaged as plants. They stood up on root legs and began walking toward the city with earth-shaking steps. Command Yun-Ho reported to Admiral Huck, "The situation here is beyond anything we've prepared for. The humans are not fighting us anymore. They are fighting beside us against these monsters. Some of them seem to know how to hurt these things." Indeed, human soldiers and civilians were working alongside the Zephrian troops they had been shooting. At just hours before, A human sergeant showed Yunho's men how certain sounds could make the creatures hesitate, while a group of scientists demonstrated that specific chemical compounds could slow the monsters down. In a research facility that had become a makeshift fortress, Dr. Seojin Nam worked frantically to understand what they were facing. He was a marine biologist who had spent his life studying ocean creatures. But nothing in his education had prepared him for this. "These things are not from our world," he explained to a mixed group of human and alien survivors who had barricaded themselves in his laboratory. "They exist partly in our dimension and partly somewhere else. When your ships came through space, the energy from your engines must have weakened whatever barriers were keeping them locked away." A Zephrian scientist named Keth examined one of the smaller creatures they had managed to kill. "This tissue structure is impossible," he said. "It exists in multiple dimensional states at once. No wonder our weapons barely affect them." Seojin pulled up old research files on his computer. "For decades we have found strange fossils and artifacts that we could not explain. Ancient civilizations all over Earth have stories about monsters that sleep beneath the ground and sea. We thought these were just myths and legends." "They were not myths," said Captain Yunho grimly as another roar echoed across the city. "They were warnings." Outside the research facility, the battle between two alien species and humanity's worst nightmares continued to rage. The invasion fleet that had come to conquer Earth now found itself fighting desperately just to survive against enemies that should not exist. Admiral Huck realized with growing horror that his fleet had not found a primitive world to conquer. They had found a prison, and they had accidentally unlocked the door. The monsters had spread across the entire planet like a plague of nightmares. Admiral Huck found himself in the ruins of a library in Tokyo, surrounded by broken books and ancient scrolls. He never thought he would be studying human history. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Working beside him was Dr. Yoongi Han, a human woman who had spent her entire life studying the forgotten past of her own world. She was small and quiet, but her knowledge was vast. Together, they searched through thousands of old texts, looking for any clue about the creatures that were destroying both their civilizations. "Look at this," Yoongi said, pointing to symbols carved into a stone tablet. "These markings are over 5,000 years old. They talk about something called the sleepers beneath." Hugh's translation device struggled with the ancient writing, but slowly the meaning became clear. "Your people knew about these things," he said with growing amazement. "These old books. And stones tell stories about monsters that live under the earth and sea. They call them the Watchers in the Deep." Yoongi nodded with a grim expression on her face. "Every ancient civilization on Earth has similar stories. The Egyptians wrote about creatures that came from the void between stars. The Greeks told tales of titans that were locked away beneath the earth. Native American tribes spoke of ancient evils that must never be awakened." She showed him cave paintings that were drawn by humans who lived thousands of years ago. The images showed creatures with tentacles and impossible shapes, beings that looked exactly like the monsters now attacking their world. "We always thought these were just stories," Yoongi continued. "Myths and legends that primitive people made up to explain things they did not understand. But what if they were not dreams or imagination? What if they were memories passed down through generations?" The truth hit Admiral Huck like a physical punch to his stomach. Earth was not just another planet filled with primitive life. It was a prison. Some ancient civilization had locked away the most dangerous creatures in the universe and sealed them beneath the surface of this world. "The energy from our ships," Huck said slowly as the horrible realization sank in. "When we came through space with our reality-bending technology, when we prepared to crack open your planet's defenses, we damaged the barriers that were keeping these things contained. The Zephrian Empire had weapons that could split planets in half and technology that could bend the laws of physics. These same forces had weakened the ancient seals that kept Earth's monsters locked away in their dimensional prisons. While Hugh and Yoongi studied the past, human soldiers around the world were learning to fight the present threat with remarkable speed. Colonel Minho Kim had set up a research base in what used to be a shopping mall in Seoul. His team included both human and Zephrian soldiers who were working together to find ways to hurt the creatures. "I have discovered something important," Minho announced to his mixed group of fighters. Normal weapons do not work because these things exist partially outside our reality, but they still need anchor points in our dimension to interact with our world. He showed them how regular explosives, when combined with specific sound frequencies, could actually damage the monsters. The creatures might be partly in another dimension, but they still needed to touch their world to attack it. "We can hurt them," Minho explained. "But we need to hit them at exactly the right frequency while they are trying to manifest in our reality." The human ability to adapt and improvise amazed the Zephrian soldiers. They watched as humans turned ordinary objects into weapons against impossible enemies. A group of office workers had modified their building's fire alarm system to produce the harmful frequencies. Construction crews used their heavy machinery to create sound barriers that could slow the creatures down. The most impressive adaptation came from engineer Ha-Jin Lee, who had been working on subway tunnel repairs when the invasion began. He realized that the underground train system could be turned into a massive weapon. "The tunnels have perfect acoustics," Ha-Jin explained to a group of survivors. "If we can generate the right frequencies and amplify them through the entire subway network, we can create a resonance chamber that covers the whole city." His team worked day and night to modify the subway system. They installed speakers and sound generators throughout the underground network. When they activated the system, the entire city of Seoul became one giant musical instrument. Tuned to hurt the monsters, the sound waves traveled through the tunnels and up into the streets, creating a frequency that made the creatures retreat back underground. For the first time since the nightmare began, the humans and Zephrians had successfully driven the monsters away from a major population center. "Your species is incredible," Admiral Huck told Dr. Yoonji as they watched the creatures disappear back into the depths. "We came here thinking you were primitive, but you are the most adaptable warriors I have ever seen." Yoonji looked at the destruction around them and sighed. "We have had to be adaptable. Now I understand why. Earth was never as safe as we thought it was. We have been living on top of a prison for thousands of years, and somehow we evolved to be its guards without even knowing it. The real enemy was not the Zephrian Empire or the human resistance. It was something far older and more dangerous than either species had ever imagined. The answer came from an unexpected partnership between two brilliant minds from different worlds. Dr. Minji Kim had been working around the clock in her laboratory, trying to understand how the creatures moved between dimensions. Beside her worked Vex, a Zephrian scientist-engineer who had originally come to study Earth's resources for exploitation. "I think I have found something," Minji said excitedly as she stared at her computer screen. "These monsters are vulnerable to a very specific quantum frequency. It is like a musical note that exists at the exact point where our technology meets yours." Dex examined her data with his advanced alien instruments. His large eyes widened as he understood what she had discovered. "Yes, I see it now. The frequency signature is perfect. But generating it requires both human and Zephrian technology working together." Minji turned to address the mixed group of human and alien commanders who had gathered in her makeshift laboratory. "Our quantum computers can create the base frequency," she explained in simple terms. "But we need your crystal matrices to make it strong enough to actually hurt these creatures." The room fell silent as everyone realized what this meant. The only way to defeat the monsters was for the two species to work together completely. There could be no secrets, no holding back of technology, no competing agendas. Admiral Huck found himself in the strangest situation of his long military career. He was taking orders from General Daeho Park, a human commander whose planet he had come to conquer just days earlier. They were now coordinating a joint defense of the same world he had planned to enslave. "This is ironic," Hugh muttered to his aide as they reviewed battle plans. "We traveled across the galaxy to make these people our slaves, and now we are fighting to save their world alongside them." The alliance that formed out of pure desperation turned out to be surprisingly effective. Zephrian energy shields protected human technicians as they worked to install the new hybrid devices around the city. Meanwhile, human knowledge about the creatures' behavior patterns helped guide alien strike teams to the most important locations. The humans had been studying these monsters for days now, learning their weaknesses and habits. The Zephrians brought advanced weapons and defensive technology that could actually protect people while they worked. Together, They were stronger than either group could be alone. Captain Yunho led one of these mixed squads through the destroyed streets of Busan. His team included Zephrian Marines armed with plasma weapons, but also human civilians who had become hardened fighters during the crisis. Among them was Dr. Sia Janam, the marine biologist who had been studying the creatures since they first appeared. The monsters are not attacking randomly, Sjajin explained, as they made their way toward an ancient Buddhist temple on a hilltop. They are trying to reach specific locations around the planet. I think these places are natural containment points that help keep them locked away. The team fought through smaller creatures that tried to block their path. The Zephrian soldiers provided covering fire, while the humans used their knowledge of the local area to find safe routes through the ruins. If we can get to these containment points and reinforce them with our combined technology, Xiagan continued, we might be able to strengthen the prison that holds these things. They reached the temple just as a massive creature began climbing the hill toward them. This one was different from the others, more organized and intelligent. It seemed to understand that they were trying to stop it from reaching the sacred site. It knows what we are doing, whispered one of the human fighters. The battle at the temple was fierce, but the mixed team managed to drive the creature back long enough to install one of the new quantum crystal resonators. The device looked like a combination of human computer technology and alien crystal formations. When they activated it, the area around the temple began to glow with a soft blue light. Similar battles were taking place all around the world. The plan was ambitious and desperate at the same time. It wanted to create a global network of these resonators that would essentially turn Earth into one massive prison cell again. The quantum frequencies would strengthen the barriers between dimensions and force the creatures back into their ancient confinement, but the plan required perfect coordination between two species that had been shooting at each other just hours earlier. Human and Zephrian teams had to work together at dozens of locations simultaneously. Any failure at a single point could cause the entire network to collapse. As they worked, more creatures emerged from the depths every day. The monsters were becoming stronger and more organized, as if they were learning from each battle. Some of the larger ones seemed to be coordinating attacks on the resonator sites, trying to prevent the prison from being rebuilt.
Ow.
We are running out of time, General Daeho Park reported during one of the daily planning meetings. The creatures are adapting faster than we expected. They know what we are trying to do, and they are fighting back more intelligently. Admiral Huck nodded grimly as he studied the global situation map. Then we must work faster. If we fail, both our species will be destroyed by something that should never have been released. The unlikely alliance between former enemies was holding together, but barely. Everyone knew that their next moves would determine whether Earth remained a prison for ancient horrors or became their launching point to terrorize the entire galaxy. The ground shook violently as Colonel Minho Kim fired his weapon at the massive shadow creature. Its body seemed to shift and change, like smoke made solid, with rows of sharp teeth that glowed in the darkness. Behind him, Dr. Yoonji Han worked desperately at the strange machine they had built with alien technology. "How much longer?" Minho shouted over the creature's horrible roar. 2 minutes, Yoonji called back, her hands flying over the controls. The alien scientist Dex stood beside her, his forearms moving quickly to adjust the resonator settings dot above them. Admiral Huck watched from his ship in space. He could see similar battles happening all over Earth. 12 different locations. 12 different teams fighting the same nightmare creatures. His people and the humans working together for the first time. "Sir, the creature over the Pacific Ocean is getting bigger," his officer reported. It's tearing holes in space itself." Hugh's blood ran cold. That was the largest creature, the one they feared most. If it escaped completely, both Earth and his homeworld would be destroyed. On the ground, General Daeho Park led his soldiers against another shadow beast near the resonator site. The creature moved like liquid darkness, flowing around their weapons, and reforming instantly. Every time they thought they had heard it, it came back stronger. "All teams, report status." Daeho spoke into his radio. "Site 3 ready," came a voice. "Site 7 ready." One by one, The teams around the world confirmed they were prepared.
Oh.
But the creatures were getting more violent, as if they sensed what was coming. Dr. Yun Jihan's machine began to glow with a strange blue light. The resonator hummed with power that made the air itself vibrate. Dex checked his readings and nodded to her. "Now," Yanji shouted. She pressed the activation button. Instantly, machines all over the world began to work together, creating a sound that no human ear could hear. It was a frequency that existed between dimensions. Designed to hurt the shadow creatures where they lived, the effect was immediate. The massive creature over the Pacific Ocean, which had been growing larger than a mountain, suddenly stopped. For the first time since the invasion began, it made a sound of pain. Not anger or hunger, but actual suffering. The shadow beast near. Minho's position began to shrink, its form becoming less solid. All around the world, the creatures were being pushed back into the spaces between dimensions where they belonged. But the battle was far from over. The largest creature fought back with desperate fury. It sent waves of darkness across the ocean, trying to destroy the resonator sites. Several human cities were completely destroyed in seconds. "Hold the line," General Park shouted as another wave of shadows swept toward their position. "Don't let them reach the machine." The human and alien soldiers fought side by side, their weapons barely holding back the creatures. Many brave people died in those final moments, buying time for the resonators to do their work. Slowly, the tide turned. The quantum locks that had once held the creatures began to reform, pulling them back into their dimensional prisons. The holes in space started to close. Admiral Hook watched as the giant creature over the Pacific gave one final, terrible scream before being dragged back into the darkness between worlds. The ocean was left scarred and strange, but Earth was safe. When the battle ended, both sides counted their losses. Entire cities were gone. Millions of humans and aliens had died. The planet's surface looked like a completely different world, marked by the creature's brief escape. Days later, as the alien fleet prepared to leave Earth, Admiral Huck met with the human leaders one last time. The meeting took place in a temporary shelter. Since most of the old buildings were destroyed, Dr. Mingi Kim, who had worked tirelessly to understand the creatures, stepped forward. She held a small crystal in her hands. "This contains everything we learned about them," she said, offering it to Hugh. "All our research, all our discoveries." Hugh stared at the crystal, confused. "Why would you give this to us?" "We invaded your world," General Daho Park spoke up, "'cause we realized something during the fight. These creatures don't just threaten Earth. They live in the empty spaces between stars. Other planets might be prisons, too, just like ours was. People might encounter them again," Dr. Mingi added. "Or other civilizations might need help. The knowledge should be shared." Admiral Huck took the crystal carefully. For the first time, he felt real respect for these strange humans. They had just saved their own world, but they were already thinking about protecting others as the alien ships left Earth's orbit. Both species understood that they had learned something important. The universe held terrors that no single world could face alone. But it also held the possibility of cooperation, of former enemies becoming allies against the darkness. The creatures were locked away again, but the scars they left would remain forever. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, other horrors waited for their chance to escape.